Welcome to the Silver Screen Guide podcast, where we discuss films from every genre. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast. Today we are discussing Ready Player One, directed by Steven Spielberg, written by Ernest Cline and Zach Penn. This is your co-host Corbin.
I'm Alan from Chicago.
This movie is based off the book by Ernest Cline, who did help write the screenplay, and the book came out, I believe, in 2011, so it's been a little while since its release, and in a way, it's kind of like the ultimate geek or nerd book, you could say, because there's so many little references, mostly all from the 80s, and I wasn't born in the 80s. So that doesn't mean I don't know a lot about the 80s, but some of the stuff I was like, whoa, I've never heard of some of these text adventure games, like some of the very first video games ever, and different consoles and things like that. So, and I want to note that I did read this book actually, and we do have a from page to screen video up on the YouTube channel or on the website. So make sure to check that out. If you want to know the differences and similarities between the book and the movie, I won't be bringing any of those up during the podcast. Go check out the video if you want those. But I was excited when I saw the trailer for this movie. What were your thoughts when you saw the trailer?
I was too. Okay, the first time I saw this trailer, I was a little bit apprehensive because it didn't show too much, but at the same time, I felt like it was a bit pandering, I suppose. Kind of getting you excited for what the movie's going to be. At first, I wasn't too excited until I began to see all the different references that were going to be in the movie. I think the one thing that really changed my mind was when it was one of the new covers for the movie, they had the Swordfish 2 from Cowboy Bebop on the cover. And I remember texting you a picture and saying, I don't think I said anything, but I circled it and we had a conversation. After that, I got pretty excited. But the first trailer, it was okay. But the trailers that came after that first trailer were definitely much better and really began to hype me up a bit for what I was about to see. I was pretty excited for this one. Not going to lie.
I feel the exact same way. Yeah, the trailers seem to have all kinds of references and even Easter eggs just hidden within the trailer. It was almost too much to handle because it's almost like anything you could ever think of is in the book and in the movie, and that does play into the idea how the Oasis is kind of whatever you want it to be.
Right.
Very cool concept, and we're going to be talking about whether the concept is well executed for this movie.
I think this movie and the book, too, kind of come out at a really good time because this is a nostalgia bomb if I have ever seen one. It's very much harkening back to the 80s, but we also have some 90s things in there. And they got Steven Spielberg to put on this picture, which in my mind is almost a perfect choice because basically he was the king of the 80s when it comes to making movies because, E.T. and Indiana Jones, just to name a couple. I think that Spielberg was a great, almost perfect choice for a movie like this. Whether or not that translates into how the movie ended up being is why we're here to talk about it.
Oh, absolutely. Steven Spielberg was the perfect choice. And it's kind of funny because Spielberg is referenced in the book. So it's kind of like a dream come true to have Spielberg be like, hey, I love the book, it's really cool. I want to make the movie. So that's pretty neat. But absolutely, Spielberg is a perfect choice because he did so many incredible movies from the 80s that are incredibly iconic. E.T., Indiana Jones, Goonies. I mean, the list is pretty extensive. So he was the absolute right choice to do this movie that really pays homage to the 80s and kind of revives it and brings it into the 21st century. It's a really cool blend.
And we don't just get 80s stuff. We also have, like I said, we have Cowboy Bebop, which is towards the end of the 90s. I know in one of the trailers, we saw a character from Overwatch, which is definitely a 2016 thing. So it's kind of a blend of a bunch of different stuff, mostly 80s, but we do have a bunch of different small references to other things also in the movie and in the trailers that are more modern.
Yes, and it even goes back before the 80s because We see the Adam West style Batmobile in the movie. And we also see, these are just a couple things I noticed. There's so many things. Oh, it's so hard to notice them all. But there was the Cyclops from one of the 60s Sinbad movies that I recognized.
Interesting.
So it does go back even beyond the 80s. It doesn't stay just within the 80s, but mostly everything pertaining to the challenges has to do with the 80s, except King Kong doesn't really. I mean, there was that King Kong remake.
Right.
But the original King Kong, so I guess you could technically say it was from the 80s.
Right.
But anyway, and we get the Akira bike. That was really cool. They incorporated that as well. And some more anime.
I forgot about that. That's right, yeah. Yeah, that was at the tail end of the 80s.
Yes.
Akira was.
But anyways, we got Ernest Cline. I think it's really cool Ernest Cline was able to write this movie, because I feel like he was able to improve upon his source material,
right.
And also the changes that were made, it's like officially sanctioned by him. So that makes me feel better about the changes.
Yeah. Now, it is not uncommon to have the author of the book come on and do the screenplay. I believe this happened for the first Hunger Games movie. There's one more movie that's more modern that also had this happen. It's not uncommon. Not usually, but as long as the author knows how to adapt his writings into a screenplay, then it'll be a pretty good adaptation. There have been times where they brought on an author to do the screenplay, and he doesn't really know what he's doing. But usually it ends up being fine. A fine screenplay, a fine adaptation of the book. Right.
And it did help. It was co-written by Zach Penn, who wrote the very first Avengers, The Incredible Hulk, X2, The Last Stand, Inspector Gadget. Okay.
Really?
Yeah. And currently he's also working on The Karate Kid 2 and Suicide Squad 2.
Interesting. So yeah, this guy's definitely dabbled in a lot of the superhero movie genre-esque movies, all of those that definitely had a rise in popularity in the last decade, 15 years or so.
We also get a pretty nice cast here, a pretty nice blend of new faces and veteran actors. Movie stars Ty Sheridan, Olivia Cook, T.J. Miller, Ben Mendelsohn, Simon Pegg, and Mark Rylance. And I have seen all of these people in something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, same here. I think the main character was one that I hadn't seen very often. I think I've seen him in one or maybe two different things. The rest of these characters that you named out, though, I'm sure I've seen before. Some of the side characters are pretty new faces to me. But yeah, like you said, we've got a nice blend of new and old characters that we've seen before and people we haven't seen yet. Yeah, it's a nice blend of... It kind of goes with the movie, a whole theme, one of the bigger themes of the movie that we'll get into.
Right. Ty Sheridan, he's kind of a new up-and-coming guy. He plays Cyclops in the most recent X-Men Apocalypse movie. Okay. Maybe one other, I can't remember. Olivia Cook, I first saw her on the Bates Motel TV show. And Ben Mendelsohn was in The Dark Knight Rises. T.J. Miller, we actually just reviewed him in Cloverfield.
Yeah, we did. I reckon when I heard his voice, was like, I know that guy.
He's got a recognizable voice.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised to see Simon Pegg as Ogden Morrow. That is not how I pictured him, but I think it works well.
Yeah.
It was just open to up your imagination, so it works well. And he does a really good American accent. I was surprised.
Yeah. Now, I do remember Olivia Cook. There's a movie that she was in called The Signal that I've seen. The movie's not that great, but that's where I remember her from. Is from that movie called The Signal.
Ah, okay. And Mark Rylance has kind of become a Spielberg favorite because he was just in the BFG, and before that he was in Bridge of Spies with Spielberg, which Rylance won the Academy Award for that performance. Right. So he's kind of a new Spielberg favorite. I don't know why, but
yeah, it's a common thing for directors to have just that one actor. Like let me think here, Christopher Nolan and Michael Caine. There's just one actor that's in like all of their movies, just even if it's a reference.
It's kind of cool.
So I wonder if that'll become the new Spielberg favorite is Mark Rylance.
Probably. Anyways, I don't know the budget for this movie because I don't think that information has been released just yet. I couldn't find it on Box Office Mojo.
I have it on Wikipedia that
Okay.
it is 175 million.
Okay, that sounds about right.
Yeah. That sounds pretty accurate to me.
Well, the opening weekend, it had 41.7 million. It was number one opening weekend, and it just came out this past weekend. And including the Easter weekend sales, it grossed 58.9 million.
That's pretty good amount.
That's a pretty decent opening, actually, and it makes sense also that it would be number one, honestly, because they picked a really good weekend for it.
Yeah.
Honestly, because everything else has already been out for a couple weeks, and the other two movies that came out would not be anywhere as near popular as this. Tyler Perry's Acrimony came in number 2, so it's 17 million, so that should tell you something right there.
Yeah.
Black Panther was number 3 again. I Can Only Imagine was number 4, and Pacific Rim Uprising was number 5.
Right. And I know that God's Not Dead 3, it also released this weekend as well. I think same day as Ready Player One. But that is a pretty limited release compared to Ready Player One, which I know is a wide release at this point.
Oh yeah. Ready Player One came out in about 3,000 more screens than God's Not Dead. God's Not Dead 3 came in at number 12 with 2.6 million at the box office. I mean, it's got a small budget for a movie of that purpose. It seems about right, honestly, especially going up against Ready Player One.
Right. That purpose, and because it is on 3,000 less screens, it makes sense why it is number 12 at this point.
Yes. Well, the foreign box office was pretty good, 127.5 million, bringing it to a worldwide total so far of 186.4 million. So that means it has made more than its budget for the opening weekend.
It topped its budget in the opening weekend, which is on the right track. That's exactly what you want.
It's always a good sign.
Yeah. And I've also heard that this is one of Spielberg's biggest opening weekends in a long time. I don't know those numbers, but that's just what I've heard.
I'm sure that's true because the BFG was mostly a kids movie.
Yeah.
I went and saw it at the drive-in, didn't stay for the end. Taco Bell sounded more appealing. And, I mean, The Post, it's a fine movie. It is not a big box office draw, and the same with Bridge of Spies. So Spielberg has been doing these very muted palette, serious drama type movies, except for the BFG. It was a pretty colorful, fantastical movie. Yeah. So he's kind of all over the place with what he's doing, but I'm glad he's back to his roots here with this more 80s themed. You get the gang together, you go on a fun adventure, you just have a blast with it. So I'm glad. IMDb has the score. It's kind of leveled out right now at a solid 8. Which is impressive. Right.
Now, I actually watched the score. When it was first posted, like when the score first came up on IMDb, it was at an 8.2, I think. Mm-hmm. And that actually scared me a little bit because because that's pretty low for a movie to begin on. Usually they begin, if it's a really great movie, it'll begin on a high 9 or maybe a higher 8. This was a pretty low 8, and so I was like, that's interesting. But yeah, it's only gone down a little bit since then, only to an 8, which is good news that it's that high of a score. And it's been about a week or so since it's been out. I'm assuming it's going to continue to drop a little bit, just out of my own experience in watching these scores as they come out, and then as more and more people add on their score. I'm assuming it'll drop. I guess we'll see.
I would be interested to know if it does drop because it has over 40,000 votes right now. So a fairly solid number. I don't see it dropping too much. And I was surprised that it is at an 8.
Yeah.
I don't know. But, okay, so Cinema Score, which is legitimate people who did go see the movie. Nobody can just go and rate it. These are actually people who came out of the theater. They gave it an A-. That's
a pretty good score.
It's pretty impressive. So, we are about to give you the plot of this movie, and we're about to discuss all the wonderful, juicy Easter egg spoilers, and if you don't want Ready Player One to be spoiled for you, then make sure to hit pause right this very second, go grab your ticket, and jump into the theaters and watch it, and then come back and hit play, because you've been warned, all the Easter eggs are going to be spoiled. Set in Columbus, Ohio, 2045, the story follows Wade Watts, an 18-year-old who lives in the stacks, run-down trailer parks with trailers stacked a mile high. He is one of many participating in the hunt for Halliday's egg. James Halliday, who is a tech genius that surpassed Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, created the Oasis, a massive virtual world that has become people's escape from the degraded United States. Upon Halliday's death, he releases a video explaining 3 challenges will unlock 3 keys, and whoever collects all 3 will inherit not only the Oasis, but Halliday's entire trillion-dollar fortune. During the hunt, Wade, aka Parzival, teams up with H, Artemis, Daito, and Sho to win the egg and defeat the evil corporate overlords IOI. Ultimately, Wade defeats IOI and inherits Halliday's fortune while winning Artemis, the girl of his dreams. The two of them use the money to create a better world and bring some happiness back to reality. So a pretty straightforward plot, honestly.
Yeah, very straightforward plot. I'm going to say this right now. This is very much a 21st century American movie made for millennials. This is what this movie is. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. As Noah, you and I were talking. It's pretty streamlined. That's really all it is. And whether or not that's a good or bad thing, we'll hold the audience's suspense with. But yes, very simple. Very simple.
The beginning of the movie is fairly exposition heavy because I would say there is kind of a decent amount of information in order for you to know to jump into the plot.
Right.
I think the exposition is handled fairly well. It might be slightly too heavy because in a movie, you're supposed to show, not tell.
Right.
So some things we do just get from watching it. We don't need to be like, oh, okay, well, that's what that means, I guess. And this is what that is.
Right.
It didn't bother me too much, but I already knew all this information going in from the book. But what did you think of all this exposition?
Yeah. At first, it was fine. It was pretty needed. You need to it kind of just drops you in the middle of everything. Things are already happening. You know, the Oasis has already been created years before this movie even began. So yes, exposition, narration, is pretty needed in this kind of a context. But then it keeps going and keeps going. And at a point, I began to think to myself, okay, but do I need to know all of this information? Because for a movie that is so simple, there's a lot of stuff that is, I guess, the movie thinks is needed to know in order to get into this world. And yes, some of that is true, although I do think that they really could have simplified this exposition, this opening scene, because it is just so heavy with exposition. Some of it is needed still, but yeah, for me, it was too much. It got to a point where I was like, okay, yeah, show me, don't tell me, you know. Like you said, the movie needs to show you, not tell you. But yes, needed information, for the most part, becomes too much after that for me.
I do feel like once we're past the exposition, we jump into the first challenge really quickly. There is no figuring it out. They're like, oh, some old forgotten gunter found out where the first challenge was, and I think that's the right move. I was surprised because I was like, whoa, we are jumping into this fast.
Yeah.
There is no problem solving, really. I mean, okay, there's no problem solving to figure out where the first challenge is on the side of the main character. He's just participating in it. And that really threw me off, but I think it was a good way to get the audience in gear going with the movie.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it really goes with the rest of the movie. This movie is very fast. It has a really fast pace, and for 2 hours and 20 minutes, it goes by really quick. And so, yes, I think you're absolutely right. It moves on from showing us, okay, this is the Earth. Okay, you get it. Moving on. And we move right into the Oasis. It goes, okay, this is the Oasis, like a brief overview, and goes, okay, moving on, and goes straight into the race. Like, we spend maybe 3 minutes exploring the world before we get to this chase, or I guess this racing scene with the first clue. It does not waste any time before it jumps right into the Oasis. And yeah, I'm going to give the movie to it. I'm going to give it to the movie. I do think that this is a pretty good choice to just jump as quick as possible into the Oasis as it can and really get us going into, okay, this is the actual world that we're going to be exploring. So yeah, although I do want to go back to the Earth really quick. Did it feel a little bit cyberpunky to you? Because it felt really cyberpunky to me.
Yeah, I guess so, because you see like a ton of drones, and everything is like really outdated, yet it's still high tech with everything. So I can definitely see that cyberpunkiness, and I don't think any steampunk, just more so cyberpunk.
Yeah.
I guess.
This isn't steampunk.
Yeah. I don't think they overplayed it like too much though, so it wasn't like too annoying or anything for me personally.
I honestly would have loved to spend more time on Earth, on I guess it's reality, not Earth, because I'm just a huge sucker for cyberpunk. I really like that stuff, and I was actually kind of surprised to see it in this movie, because usually when you have a 21st century modern movie that is set in the future, everything's very clean, everything's essentially looking perfect. I guess with the exception of Blade Runner 2049, usually you don't get too much cyberpunk where things are kind of crappy. And it goes with the story, because Earth is meant to be very crappy. That's why people are spending essentially all of their time in the Oasis, is because Earth, it just sucks. But as the Oasis, you like you said, you can basically do whatever you want.
Yes. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the movie didn't really give us much of an explanation as to why the United States is the way it is now. Why is it so cruddy?
Yes. So it briefly explains that overpopulation, political stuff, economic stagnation, that's essentially what happened. It's essentially just I think it's what the movie's going for. It's what is going on right now in the world, and then just made it 10 times worse. So this is the after effects of all the stuff that's happening now. Just everything has just gotten worse and hasn't gotten any better. That's basically it. They briefly explain that. The movie actually, it's kind of interesting, because the movie tries to hide that fact that this is how we got to this point. Almost as if it wants to spend so much time in the Oasis, which I'm sure is on purpose.
And I do like that decision that they don't really go into the politics of it all, because that's not what this movie is about at all.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I am thankful they did remove that aspect, because that was fairly prevalent in the source material, is it gave an explanation for everything. And it just seemed more like this very rote type of explanation. Global warming. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
I'm just glad the movie didn't go there, because that's not what the focus is on this movie.
Yeah.
They could have done it, but they didn't, thankfully.
Yeah, it's not a movie that's trying to make a statement on the current state of the political side or anything else. It's not that kind of movie. It's not meant to really hit you hard with, this is what happens if we stay on this track kind of a movie. Not really. It's not really
much
like
more
that.
Of a fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. It really wants to hit in the fantasy aspect of the Oasis, which is, like I said, exactly what this movie is and what it should be doing.
And I think this race is absolutely awesome. I just love the camera work, how you're just following his DeLorean everywhere, and just the camera is like constantly moving. And I think that's something Spielberg is kind of known for, especially with more of his 80s movies, is you're not really passive. You're kind of active in the movie with the characters. You're kind of going along with the adventure. And I know camera equipment was much more limited, and some of this isn't even really camera equipment. This is just CGI generated scenes that they're creating and filming. And I think they're utilizing it pretty well. I'm sucked into it. I'm excited in this race.
Oh, yeah. This race has a lot of energy. It's, like you said, the camera moves a lot. And it's very Spielberg-esque. Spielberg is known for having some pretty creative, what we call oneers, which is unbroken shots. There was one pretty early on when in reality when Wade is like climbing out of his trailer and then sliding down onto the ground. That's a pretty long take. This is, once again, we have another longer take of just the race itself. Yeah, there's a lot of energy in this race. It's very, very quick. A lot of things happen, and it's at this point, it's borderline, okay, too much is happening, but it never crossed that line for me, where there's just so much happening at one time that I just get lost. That never happened. It got close to that, but never crossed the line. So yeah, I think this race is a lot of fun, and I say my only really small issue is that there's a lot of references in this opening, which is fine, but it almost feels like they're just making stuff up as they go along. How did you feel that at all? That's kind of what the vibe I started to get as the race was ending.
Yeah, I got the same thing too. I liked the implementation of King Kong as having to get past him. Yeah, that was cool. And the T-Rex. Some of this other stuff was it was almost like a little too much chaos though. It's extreme chaos. And also just talking about like other references, like you said, of character references, it was almost like, let's just see how many we can stuff in here so people will buy the Blu-ray and watch it on, a tenth of the speed
right.
to dissect everything. Because I saw Hello Kitty was there. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I guess they're trying to appeal to everybody, and some of those things I had no idea who it was.
Yeah.
And like in the end fight, they had Spawn. Mm-hmm. There's just so many things where it's just like, this is random or crazy.
Right. And that's one thing I have to commend the movie for, is that because of how many references there are in this movie, it almost makes it infinitely rewatchable, because this movie in Spielberg, this is what I think the most impressive part of this whole movie is the level of detail that Spielberg puts into it. Like, it's dense. And I tried to write down as many references as I could, and I get lost trying to write down as many as I could because there's so many. Like, I saw Ryu from Street Fighter. I saw Freddy in here in this opening scene. I missed Hello Kitty. I was actively looking for the Swordfish too. I missed it, but apparently it did show up in the end. Lots of stuff. There are so many references in this movie that it's tiresome to try and catch it all in the first viewing. Impossible, I would say. So yes, as dense as this movie is, there are a lot of references. I think that it is very impressive that Spielberg was able to capture as much as he could in this movie. And there is one scene, we'll get to it in a sec, that I think really shows off Spielberg's level of detail that he puts into this movie.
So every challenge kind of it's not so straightforward, even though it always seems straightforward. Yeah. Like, oh yeah, you just have to outrun King Kong if you're fast enough or whatever. So what did you think of the secret to winning this challenge? Like, when you finally figured it out and the character finally did it, were you satisfied with how he figured it out, or did it seem like a little too easy or something?
I never really thought it was too easy. I thought it was pretty interesting that they took the Back to the Future kind of a way where they had to go back to the past or back to the past to win the race. And in this case, he just drives backwards and he wins the race. I was really waiting for a Mario Kart reference. We do get one later on, but I was really waiting for a big Mario Kart reference for this. Like maybe Lakatu would show up. Or sorry, maybe Lakitu would show up and say, you're going the wrong way or something like that. Anyways, I never really thought it was cheating. Because it is the first challenge. I thought it was pretty alright. But I could see why some may think that.
I gotta say, that actually would have been awesome if that little character from Mario Kart would have showed up on his little cloud with his fishing pole or whatever it was, showing you they were going the wrong way. That would have been awesome. I wish, darn it, why? Probably Nintendo is just being super greedy like usual.
Yeah, Nintendo's not usually one to allow that.
I know, because I was thinking the exact same thing. With all of these cars, I was trying to spot which cars were what, and I wanted to see Mario in his little cart or something, and I didn't. I didn't see it. Not saying it's not there. I don't think it's there. Yeah. But darn it, I do kind of like though how in classic video games, and I don't know, I'm kind of using the term classic loosely. I'm thinking of some like Nintendo 64 era games. There would always be shortcuts. And that's even still today. They've implemented those where there are multiple ways to get to the finish line. And I think that's what they were drawing from with having him go this way. So I think it was a pretty neat concept. And the way he figured it out, the way he put it together does show his knowledge that he is a pretty knowledgeable person about putting, different things together. Yeah. So I liked it, but it almost was like, well, it's like easier than you expected. Like everybody's making it so hard. It's actually that easy. But it goes quick. Yeah. It goes quick. And I'll be honest, when they started talking about the third challenge, I was like, wait, do they mean the second challenge? Because this movie goes so quick, I forgot the race was the first one. And then I totally forgot about the second one. And I was like, wait, we're not to the third one already, are we?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It moves fast. That is, you do bring up another interesting point. When you say classic video games, I want to go even further back and say even those games that were released in the 80s, early 90s, I'm talking like arcade games, they are very straightforward. There's one game that is referenced called Asteroids, which literally the whole thing you do is you rotate and move your ship and shoot asteroids, and the smaller chunks you get, and the more you shoot at the smaller chunks you're going to get, and then if you eventually hit it at its smallest state, you get more points. The goal is just to get as many as to kill, or not kill. The goal is to destroy as many asteroids as possible. This is very, very similar to that kind of a structure. Very straightforward. We have this set path. We're not really going to deviate very far from it. It even goes down to like the construction of video games. Everything in the 80s was in the world of the movie is pretty simple. Things like that. So I want to go back just a little bit before we get to the end of the first the end of the first clue or the first key. Wade's home life. We get to see it in this portion, and there's a couple of interesting details that are brought up. So the first thing is he has an abusive stepfather.
Uncle.
Okay. Abusive.
That's actually
uncle.
her aunt's boyfriend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. That's right. I remember now. It was his aunt. So yes, he essentially the abusive stepfather. That's a pretty cliche choice, I felt, but we do get an interesting drop line that the uncle here, he supposedly is the one who pays for the house, but he had spent all of his money on the Oasis. He spent the entire money for their house on the Oasis, and it kind of goes to show that this is I don't know if it's a normal thing, but I'm assuming it's pretty normal. What do you think about those two pieces of the movie?
Yeah, I think so, because they do take the time to show, like the mom was playing on the couch, and her son is like, "Mom, I need you," and she's like, "Go get your dad," and yeah, she's freaking out while playing that game. So I do think it does show a good job of how people have lost touch with reality, and they don't even care about their loved ones. It's pretty much they're all out for themselves while masquerading to pretend like, well, this is for the betterment of our family, even though it doesn't really help. Right. I will say concerning Wade's home life, they're trying to make me like feel bad and care for him, but it's not really doing it for me. I don't feel a lot of emotions when that comes around. Like when he gets like slapped and falls to the floor, sure, nobody likes to see that, but otherwise I don't feel the connection, the emotional connection. Yeah,
I do kind of agree with that. The movie doesn't spend very much time on it, and later on, his stack, I guess is what it's called, is destroyed by some drones later on. Right. There really isn't anything there. We cut back to him a couple of times in the movie, but There's
didn't feel
no
anything.
real connection between them. I don't know if that's what the movie's going for. It feels very 80s, just that kind of cliche of the abusive stepfather, but in this case, it's actually the uncle.
Right.
I honestly forgot about it until I was reading through my notes, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that.
Okay, I actually just remembered something that I forgot about, but now I remembered. Okay, let's go back to the title sequence.
Okay.
I had a big issue with that, actually, because it shows Anorak in the clouds, I believe, and then it like pans down and it's like going straight down to Earth, but then it cuts to just a black screen with white text that says Ready Player One. And then it cuts back to, the clouds have not moved at all. It's like the shot paused so they could go to the title screen and then cut back to it. And that felt really sloppy to me. It was just so choppy how it's like they kind of forgot they didn't know where to put the title. It just like cut. It was an abrupt cut, a very boring looking plain black screen and white text. And then they cut back to the shot so it could resume. I was disappointed with that.
Yeah, I wasn't too disappointed with that. Although I will agree with you that the late title card is,
It was bad.
It's very They didn't really do anything special with it.
No.
So, moving on, we get to meet the CEO of IOI, which his name is Nolan.
Yes. Nolan Sorento.
Yeah. What do you think about Nolan, since we're just here and we're going to talk about him? What do you think about him as a character as a whole in the movie's sake?
That's probably one of my main critiques with this movie is I feel like he is not really fleshed out at all, except he is just the bad guy to be the greedy bad guy. And I think that is the entire IOI corporation to begin with. Mm-hmm. They are like so under explained. Like the movie takes its time to like explain everything else, but we're just supposed to be like, well, they're greedy, so they're bad. And there's just this really brief scene where Nolan is talking about, he's like, we're going to be able to sell up 80% of real estate on their screens. And I'm like, that's your master plan? And it just wasn't. And then they cut and that was it. I was like, okay, that is very disappointing. I have no idea what the motivations for these people are, except they just want to make money.
Right.
That's too basic for me. I think they definitely could have been more expansive with Nolan's character and with the company, aside from they're bad.
I honestly think that Nolan's character in this movie is absolutely hilarious. So let me explain. So the way I view this movie now, let's take the year that this movie is set in. 2045, right?
Yes.
Just like we were talking about in Blade Runner 2049, that's not very far off. That's like what, 30-ish years? Less than that, actually. Yeah. So clearly Nolan is our age at this point. He's very much a millennial in this generation right now. That's who he is in this movie. So it just makes me laugh because the entire reason for IOI to want to take over the Oasis is so that way they can populate it with ads. So they can make more money, it can make revenue off that. And then, of course, that's a good business strategy because the Oasis is so huge and somehow doesn't have any ads. I really want to know where that came from because in today's day and age, there are ads everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
You can't go on any site or any app without having an ad somewhere. So it baffles me that there are no ads in this world, but I digress. So Nolan's character, in a roundabout kind of way, to me, just feels just honestly really funny because he's a millennial now, in our day and age, who is trying to run this big company, and he really wants to put ads and everything because he wants to make money. I just find that just to be really funny. Other than that, he's a pretty weak character, but by the same token, I think that this whole movie's pretty much populated with very weak characters, just in general.
Yeah.
It's very much a stylistic choice where they want to keep things simple. Yeah. Not only just the story, but the characters. Everything in this movie is very simple, and that goes down to even the IOI. Their only goal is because they want to put ads in the Oasis.
I would say the most fleshed out character in this movie is probably Artemis, because she has a reason for wanting to do this. Like, a legitimate, heartfelt reason, because she talks about how her dad he had debt to IOI, therefore he had to go to a, quote, help center, where he basically became this, like, indentured slave. Yeah. And they worked him to death, and he never got out of it, and that was a pretty heartfelt scene when she was explaining that, and I was really glad we got to know her character, because all the other characters, yeah, like I said, Wade's home life is pretty I'm not into it, and everybody else is just a one-dimensional character, and I get it. This movie is more about the visuals, it's more about the hunt and the story than about these characters. They're just like fun characters that you can relate to in some small way, just based upon emotional circumstances that happen.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. Artemis's character, or Samantha, very much the best, I would say the most fleshed out character, the character we understand the most. I would almost go as far as to say that the development we get for Wade and almost every other character, albeit very basic, I feel fits the story very, very well, because the only reason that they want to go and finish this quest is because they want to. And if you look at the rest of how this movie is constructed, the Oasis is made for that kind of a thing. It feels very much a modern worldview of you do it because you want to, because that's what you love to do. That's what you want to do, so you should pursue it. That's what I'm seeing. But I do agree with you. It would be very nice if we had deeper characters with more motivation, I guess, aside from, oh, I want to do this because that'd be cool to have. You know, it's like this. It's like the lottery kind of a thing. You have a very, very small chance, like very small chance of actually winning the lottery if you buy a ticket. But it's because of that very small chance that people buy tickets. If they didn't buy tickets, then it wouldn't be a thing. That's kind of what I see from it. With the Oasis and just the movie in general. Is it a good or bad thing? I'd say at least it has a reason. Because in a lot of movies that just have weak characters, there really is no reason for them to be weak characters. This one I feel has a more legitimate reason, just because of how the whole movie's constructed. But yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, I get what they're trying to say, that they don't want IOI to win because they're the evil corporate overlords.
Yeah.
And they will just totally ruin the Oasis. But I don't really feel that desperation in this movie, per se. Like, there are times where it's like, yeah, we gotta beat them because they're clearly, like, blatantly antagonizing us.
Yes.
But otherwise, I don't feel like that's as strongly fleshed out or connected as it should be. We need a reason why they're doing this, but like I said, leave the reasons for the backseat. Just focus on the fun visuals and the fun story, basically.
I will agree with you when we get to the latter half of the movie, when Wade really begins to find those clues. I feel like, okay, now at this point we need more motivation than what we're getting. But yeah, for the most part, I think what this movie does is pretty on par with what the movie's supposed to do. So let's jump back into the story real quick. So when we after we meet Nolan, we jump back in with our main character Wade and H, and they're walking through this hallway of a bunch of different, I guess, artifacts that you can buy. We see this thing called because of this, Wade, has gotten a lot of money because he got the first clue. We see this thing called the Holy Hand Grenade from Monty Python. We see the Zemeckis Cube here. There's one more, I forget the name of it, but essentially it just decimates all the people on the Oasis and just resets the whole game. The catalyst. Yes, that's what it's called. For the sector, yeah. Right. I like to call this the foreshadowing scene because it's so forward and it's so obvious that every single one of these things that we just walked past is going to come back somehow. But albeit, it's just fun just to have. I think the funniest thing for me is just the Zemeckis Cube. It's like a Rubik's Cube, but it does special things with Zemeckis. I thought that was just hilarious.
And I can see why they were focusing more on these references than on some video games per se, because I can see this, they didn't want this to turn into like an Adam Sandler Pixels movie.
Yes.
Where they have to battle a giant Pac-Man and everybody absolutely hates it. So I can see why they steered clear from some of that and decided to get a little more referential and creative with certain things like that. I think it was the right move. And I was pretty excited and surprised by the second challenge.
Yeah, what was the second? Oh, I know what it was. I remember now. Yes.
I forgot it too, but I remembered it. It's, like I said, this movie kind of, the way it handles the challenges, you almost like don't even realize it until it's passed, and you're like, oh wait, that was it. Okay.
Right. So the second challenge, yes, we hop straight into The Shining. Now we find this out because Wade figures out a clue from the past memories of Halliday and I think it's like the museum of some sort.
Yeah.
Yes. So we find out. Right. So we find out what the next clue is. So we jump right into The Shining. Now this is the scene I was talking about when I said that the level of detail that Spielberg puts into this movie really shines because
shines.
Yes, because yes, we are in The Shining. But I say this because not only did they get the set 1-to-1, not only did they get the feel 1-to-1, or any of the other elements of the movie, but the two main things that I think really set this movie apart, or this scene apart from every other scene, and made this scene for me at least one of the best ones of the movie, is because they shot it exactly like Kubrick, and they added in the graininess of it actually as if it was being shot on film, like it was from The Shining. They pulled the footage straight from The Shining and put it into the movie. For me, just that level of detail alone was astounding, just because Spielberg has such care with this movie that seeing those two seemingly very small details really showed me that Spielberg cares about this movie, at the very least.
Oh yeah, this was a total surprise to me because I had no idea this was going to be the second challenge.
Yeah.
And when they did enter it, it was a really amazing recreation of the Overlook Hotel, and even when the blood like falls in slow motion, because that's just like in the teaser trailer, or like maybe it's just the actual trailer for the movie. Those little girls, everything, was so like wonderfully recreated, and it makes sense because he was talking about like not being able to take the leap and always wanting to go back and kind of like fix things, and that makes sense because I love how Halliday is in the picture. Whereas it's Jack Nicholson in the picture in The Shining in the movie. And I was getting a little worried though with the bathroom scene with that lady. I was like, they can't, because my girlfriend was trying her best to close my eyes and cover them. And I'm like, they're not going to show nudity. At least I hope not, because I've got like a 7-year-old on my left and a 10-year-old in front of me. Like they wouldn't go this route. But the way it was utilized, how she turned into that fighting zombie, and but when he goes to the maze and we see the 2 feet walking with the axe, I'm like, oh my gosh, are they going to show Jack Nicholson? Are they going to show Jack Torrance? I was hoping they would, and they didn't. Yeah,
I was hoping they would too. I kind of understand why they didn't.
Sure,
because they would have to basically do CGI over his face. Or the double's face, it wouldn't have matched the movie at all, I don't think. But yeah, no, I felt the exact same way. I was like, okay, are they actually going to show Jack Nicholson, or are they just going to move on? They moved on. But yeah, this scene is, I think, one of the biggest ways of showing Spielberg's care for detail, especially in this movie, because it is just so, I would say, astoundingly accurate to how The Shining looks, not only just as a movie, but also homages the late Kubrick. I think that it's very, very well done, at least aesthetically wise. Now, how it fits into the movie, this is kind of where I begin to question a lot of the references, because yes, it is really, really fun to go all the way back to The Shining, one of the horror classics now from the 80s. But why? That's my biggest question, is with a lot of references, why do we have to have this reference here?
Okay, so I believe the reason is because that is the movie he went to go see with Kira.
Right.
And instead of taking the leap to kiss her and tell his feelings for her, he didn't. And there was also something about a riddle where it was talking about the author didn't like... I can't remember it at all. But all I know is that Stephen King did not like Kubrick's adaptation of The Shining.
Right.
And that factored into the riddle. Plus with the whole motif of the very first clue, they seem to kind of build off of each other about going back. That's my guess. I would have to rewatch the movie to really analyze those connective details. So you might be right. The connectivity of it may be a little fuzzy. Personally, I didn't have an issue with it. It does seem very out of place, though, because it's like kind of weird because we have a fun race and everything is very fun and lighthearted so far, but then we go into this dark movie with this zombie woman trying to kill him, and they do play it up for kind of a very lighthearted way with H and the comedy running around. Right. But yeah, it is this like, whoa, this is dark, and maybe that's their attempt to kind of bring a more emotional side to Halliday's feelings. That's kind of how he was feeling with missing out on his chance with Kira. But I can see what you're saying, but I don't think it bothers me as much as you did.
Right, yeah. I did get all that. The author hated somebody else's rendition of their work. Yes, it was Kira. There was Halliday's and Kira's first date, but he didn't take the leap and kiss her, which we didn't see Artemis essentially take the leap in the ballroom and save her. And I understand all that, but yes, I think the implementation is just fuzzy. Now, this one I think is better implemented than a lot of the other references. Some of them I think just they're there just because, and this is just an example I'm trying to give. Not just this alone is the only thing in the movie, but this is just like an example of some of the other references in the movie that I feel like are just there because of, I don't know, this because. So yeah, but yes, I do think that this is one of the better scenes. I think that it is implemented very, very well. But I do think that they could have, I guess, stitched it together into the script more organically, I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
Well, I would agree because earlier in the podcast, I did reference how by the time they found the third challenge, and I thought, wait, what?
Yeah.
What about the second one? And then, honestly, when I was making my video about talking about the differences between the book and the movie, I totally forgot what the second one was for the movie. And you just did the same thing earlier, too. You're like, and the second one is what? Yeah, because it doesn't really seem to fit. I get what they're trying to do because the book features the movies War Games and Monty Python. They actually go into those movies.
Right.
So I can see them trying to do that with this. But yeah, it is a little weird. It's not very organic with how it's pushed in. Maybe upon subsequent viewings, it would feel more organic. But I think that's because this is a movie. I don't know, this movie seems so geared towards video games that you forget it is still talking about other things that occurred in the 80s, music and movies, not just video games.
Yeah. And I can kind of see why they want to go more for video games because video game culture is very, very big now, and a lot of video game, I would say, knowledge, just knowing where they began. 80s is when it just exploded. After the crash. So yes, it is interesting that they're geared more towards video games versus movies. It doesn't bother me that they went into a movie like this, but yes, I think we've seen they both have the issue of they should have worked that more organically into the script, not just had it just because. Like I feel like it almost could have been any movie, but we got The Shining. It still looks great, and unfortunately, because it isn't worked in organically, we both just realized, we both forgot that it was in this movie, which is surprising because of how I guess aesthetically pleasing it is.
Okay, so how do IOI and the Sixers find the third challenge so quickly. See, that part really threw me off, where they're like, they've already found it, and just like the characters, I'm like, what? How?
Right.
I don't know if they tell me.
Oh man, I think I have it in my notes, but I can't exactly remember. I can't remember. That does happen later in the movie, when they find that out. Well, okay. I think they figure it out from the clue that Halliday gives them, because after they beat the second challenge, they of course give them a clue. They took the first challenge. That's how they found the second one. So they give them a clue, and I think that IOI kind of figures out, okay, well, it has to at the very least do with a game on the Atari that is in the middle of what is it? Doom Island, I think. No, Island of Doom. I can't remember.
It's the Planet Doom.
That's right. The Planet Doom. I don't know. I don't really remember it. It's very possible that they just didn't give an explanation too.
I guess what I'm trying to say is I wish there was a little bit more puzzle solving in this movie.
Yeah.
Because puzzle games are fairly popular, and I think they could have worked that in a little better, where it was a little bit more of a challenge. They weren't just able to go to those journal archives and just go to the exact right clip.
Right.
And they're like, wait, okay, that must be it. Now wait, which one could it be? It's this one. And bingo, they do it.
Yeah.
And I do wish there was a little bit more puzzle solving. I understand they have to appeal to a wide range of audience that want to just sit back and not really think. If that makes sense. Yeah. Yep. I don't know. I just feel like they could have done that a little better.
Oh, yes. There are a lot of conveniences in this movie. Distractingly too many. It gets to a point I felt, just because, yes, like you said, they just so happened to be listening to this one clip in the museum that just so happened to lead them to the next clue. Things like that. There are a lot of those in Ready Player One, and they become, at first it's whatever, it's, that's just the style of the movie, but then they, like you said, they begin to be just almost too simple. Like the script forced it to be that way. That's at least how I felt with a lot of these things. That one is one of them in particular. I point out a couple of them, or many different times in my notes. I kind of point this out, just different pieces of the movie where I'm just like, okay, really? Like, that's how we get to this point? Yeah, there are quite a number of conveniences.
So what do you think of Artemis's kind of underground resistance? I think that's kind of cliche, and it's never utilized afterwards. I mean, I understand the compound is raided, but it doesn't factor in, like, they don't really get any help with that. I don't know, I just don't see why they introduced it and then did nothing with it.
Right. So, yes, this also kind of goes into my little issue of the movie does things without explaining itself and then explains itself later, because this tattooed dude captures Wade, right? Now we'll get to the dancing scene in a sec, but yes, so this tattooed man captures Wade, and we're led to believe that, oh, it must be a dude from IOI that captured him, because we see TJ Miller, who had tracked him and found out his real name. And it turns out it's actually just a guy from Samantha's or Artemis's posse. The movie doesn't ever explain that until later, when we already are in the moment. And at first, whatever, the first time it's not that big of a deal. But it kind of also begins to keep doing this. That also leads into my issue of conveniences. But to answer your question, so it's fine. It's more of a plot device than anything, just to kind of kick things back into gear when we need it to, after they find the clue for the third challenge and they go to stake it out. It's just a plot device. They really probably should have gone deeper with it, or at least integrated it better. Maybe Artemis and Wade should have met earlier. Also, another convenience is they happen to be really close. But they really should have done something more with this, because I feel like this would have worked better. You're right, it is a cliche that they have this underground resistance, basically, but they should have done more with it, I feel.
Yeah, that's a little bit of an issue, how everything is super convenient, how the stacks, IOI, and the resistance, everybody is all within like a 10-mile radius or 20-mile radius of each other.
Right.
And I get they need to be able to keep the plot moving, but then at the same time, it's just because like Sho and Daito and H are all there as well in the same place.
Yes. Once again, where did they come from? Also, two of them we don't ever really talk about. Like, we don't ever spend any time on them either. Like, I can't even remember their names.
I was a little disappointed. I thought Sho was a really great character. He was this really cute 11-year-old, and he's like, "What? You want me to broadcast that I'm 11 so everybody could just kill me or something like that?"
Right.
Those were really fun characters, but they were pretty much just tag along background sidekicks. So I kind of missed a little more character development with them.
Yeah, I agree. They could have been written out, and nothing would have changed.
Exactly. So, yeah, some of those conveniencies are kind of hard to overlook, and even Wade is like, wow, I didn't even know IOI was this close, and I'm like, just climb on top of your stack and you'll see it.
Right.
Yeah, it's just...
Exactly. Okay, so let's go back and talk about this dancing scene real quick. This is another time where I'm just like, okay, that's cool and all, but why does this need to be in the movie? It is a really cool scene. I will give it that. They dance essentially just like floating in midair. Right. At this point, Wade gets a new suit. He orders one after getting all the monies from the first clue. What do you think about this scene? Because this is a really important scene, but I mean, I feel as if they really should have implemented it once again better, just like The Shining.
They said that Artemis believes this is where the second challenge is, because talking about taking the plunge into that hole, and he says, well, but people do that all the time, and she said, but none of them have ever had the key. Well, that just turns out to be a false preposition of hers. It really leads to nothing except, I guess, to just show that they love each other. No, Wade loves Artemis, and she's like, you don't even know me. And then it just gives us a reason for them to fight the Sixers and for IROC to shoot at them.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really do anything to further the plot, but it's just a red herring. It's kind of the puzzle solving that I don't really want. I don't want trial and error. I want like legitimate, let's think about this and not just think about jumping down this episode 1 type tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
No Darth Maul reference or Star Wars reference in the movie. Missed opportunity. But, yeah, I guess it's fine. I don't really have much of an issue with it. I think it's just kind of a cool scene, but it really doesn't add much.
Right, yeah, and... I don't know, this is kind of where the movie begins. I begin to be torn with the movie. Because, yes, it is an important scene because this is when IROC, T.J. Miller's character, really comes into play, and we find out Wade's real name, which is Wade, and they're like, oh, you shouldn't be saying that kind of stuff on the Oasis because you don't know who's after you, and then T.J. Miller just happens to be there, and just so happens to overhear it. I don't know. In this scene, I feel like, yes, we do need the scene with the Sixers coming in and IROC finding out Wade's real name so we can locate him physically. Yes, that is important. And I get that maybe the idea for the next clue is also in this place. I just really, really wish that the movie, once again, would integrate it better and show there's a reason why this scene needs to happen in this way versus this would be a cool idea and then write it later to make it into the movie. That's what I feel is happening with this scene, is that yes, it is cool to see them dancing. It is nice that we get some really good Spielberg cinematography flying around as they are essentially suspended over this giant hole. And then we get that cool action scene with them also, once again, still in midair. That's all cool and stuff, but I really do kind of want a real reason for the scene to exist.
I'm trying not to bring in too many similarities and differences between the book, but I guess I will bring this up.
Okay.
In the book, this is Ogden Morrow's birthday party at the Distracted Globe.
Okay.
He created the Distracted Globe. And Wade wants to go there to profess his love for Artemis, like he can't get enough of her, he can't get her out of his head, and he's had a crush on her for years and years because he's always followed her blog, basically.
Right.
And this is the scene where she cuts off all communication with him for over half a year.
Wow.
Because she said, you need to get your head in the game. We're still... Nobody really teams up in this until the very end of the book because they're saying, hey, you need to figure out this clue, and you can't if you're just, because they just kind of had been like cyber dating for a while. And so they have the big battle, the Sixers bust in. Ogden Morrow is also a wizard, just like Anorak, just like Halliday. And he uses his powers to just wipe out the Sixers pretty much. And then Wade doesn't hear from Artemis until they start the battle at the castle. She completely ignores him and cuts him out of her life. And that's very different. And then it's actually Wade who gets captured by Io, and IOI, but he does that on purpose.
Right.
And that's the thing that I was like, oh, this is cool, because I thought Artemis was saving Wade so she could infiltrate them and like hack their system, because that's basically what Wade does. He purposely sells himself as an indentured servant to get all the codes that they need to like stop them in the end, and uses this really cool technology. It's pretty much, he kind of references like Escape from Alcatraz and things like that.
Okay.
But this... Okay, so let's just go ahead and go to that sequence where Artemis is captured, and we spend all this time trying to figure out how to break Artemis out to no avail because she decides to stay there. And they try and trick Sorento. I thought that was kind of cool how they were tricking him, but ultimately I think it's fruitless. Am I right?
Yeah, because... Okay, so they are able to create basically, they recreate his office, right? So they trick him into thinking that he is captured. But the way that the movie writes itself into a corner and then says, what if he sees the reflection of the actual place that he's at in his armchair? Okay.
Yeah, it was cool, but it didn't go anywhere.
Yeah. I was wondering, okay, when they moved into the scene, I was like, okay, where did they get the guns? And then I began to realize they're still in the Oasis, aren't they? Turns out I was right. But the way that they end the scene is, for me, it was just like, okay, really?
Yeah, I thought it was fun. I just wish that it would have been more fun. They would have done more with it. I honestly don't even remember how it ends up being resolved, honestly. Mm-hmm. All I know is that they figure out how to get her out of there because Sorento is so stupid he can't even remember his password. He has to, like, paste it onto it. I think that's a reference to War Games, because in War Games, Matthew Broderick is able to hack the school's computer because the principal can't ever remember the password, so he always keeps it taped to the secretary's desk.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that's probably it then.
I think that's what they're trying to go for here. I liked how they did it in War Games a little bit better, though. Mm-hmm. But anyways, so this is all fairly inconsequential. The only moments that I do really like is when she decides to stay and help fight and kind of infiltrate while being in the system. I felt like that was fairly tense, and Wade is like, you seriously need to get out of here. Mm-hmm. I did like that. I did felt that was... I was like, okay, that is intense. That does create intensity, and I can see why they chose to do it. Yeah.
And so at this point, we haven't actually mentioned the orb of, I think it's Osavox yet.
Yes.
So yes, the orb of Osavox comes into play here. T.J. Miller speaks a spell into it, and it creates a force field around the Atari that IOI is desperately trying to figure out, okay, what in the world is this next clue? I will say this. Now, the main game is Adventure, and I've heard of it. I've heard of Adventure. I haven't actually played it, but I do know about it, and I know about the secret ending and all that kind of stuff. Actually forgot about it until this movie brought it up. But I was desperately hoping that the key would have been inside E.T. for Atari 2600, which is regarded as one of the worst games ever created, and I own it. I own it and an Atari 2600. I played it, and it's bad. It's very, very bad. And they were saying, okay, it's these keys hidden in these secret areas and all this kind of stuff. They're like, okay, it has to be E.T. You can't just not. And they go for Adventure instead, which is I guess it works better for the movie to go for adventure. But I think it would have been hilarious if they did E.T., personally.
I do think that would have been pretty fun because Spielberg made the movie E.T. and then the video game was one of the worst of all time. And
yeah,
it's
exactly.
Just like,
that's exactly what my point was. It's just because Spielberg and it's the worst game, I thought that would be hilarious.
Yes, and I think the movie could have actually got away with doing that and fudged reality a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even have created a new conspiracy theory of this Easter egg hidden inside E.T. or whatnot. But the whole reason they did that is probably just to stay true to the source material.
Yeah.
Because that is like one of Halliday's first games he plays as a kid. And the movie, it's very foreshadowing. I didn't really think about it though until the end happened. Wade is talking about how Adventure is the very first video game ever to contain an Easter egg.
Right.
Of the guy who programmed his name into the game because they didn't pay him any money for it. Or no, they didn't give him any credit for the game. Right. They're just like, Atari made it and nobody else. Like Atari can make a game or something. So that's the whole point. And so that's why Halliday used Adventure to program his name and Easter egg into the very first thing. It makes sense, but honestly, if you don't have that background knowledge, and I don't really remember if the movie gives it to you or not.
It does. It does.
Okay, but yeah. I can definitely see your plan being pretty good because Spielberg made E.T.
Right.
So it kind of makes sense why they would. So I do like that idea, but I understand why they did the other one.
Yeah. I do personally think that Adventure was the better way to go just because of how it connects to Halliday. And they did foreshadow it earlier in the movie, too.
Okay.
Maybe if it would have been one of the failed games that they were trying and they tried E.T. and they couldn't get it to work, maybe that would have been enough. But yeah, I think that they should have put an E.T. in here somewhere. I just personally think it would have been hilarious just to have that small homage to it, at the very least.
I can't even understand why they didn't do that now. I didn't think about it until you brought it up, but yeah, it's like, why not?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why they didn't do it. I think it would have been hilarious and perfect. I don't know.
Okay, so what do you think about this giant battle at the end?
If the movie wasn't a nostalgia bomb yet, it was for me here.
Yes.
It was an absolute nostalgia bomb. You got the Iron Giant, which we do see earlier, but we finally get the Iron Giant to come into play and be used. Mm-hmm. Mecha Godzilla's here. I think one of the Transformers is here. I didn't be wrong about that.
You're not talking about Gundam, are you?
That might be it then.
Oh yeah, Mobile Suit Gundam?
Yes, that might be it.
I loved that.
Yes.
That was so awesome when he jumps from the plane and when Daito jumps from the plane and turns into Mobile Suit Gundam. And that was also something I really loved because Spielberg still paid respect. If you go and watch the anime, the way he transforms and does that move, it's an exact replica. It's an exact recreation. And I love that. I'm like, oh, Spielberg, you may not have watched Mobile Suit Gundam before until this movie, but you did it right. You at least got all of this stuff right, it seems like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's one of the big things about this too. And I'll get to that in a sec. So yes, we have that, and we have Tracer from Overwatch, which I mentioned earlier. Chucky's in this movie. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are in this movie. Yes, there is. Okay, if the first
Jason.
Yes, Jason. I didn't see Jason.
Mortal Kombat.
Yes. The Swordfish 2, I hear, is in here. I didn't see it. It's in the scene somewhere.
I didn't either. I was so bummed.
I know. It makes me want to go back and watch it again because apparently it's here. I know from a good source that it is in this final scene.
Yeah,
very
I'm sure
brief, apparently. So yes, all of the references that we haven't gotten before, or maybe we have, they're all here. I'm sure that the 4K would be a glorious tool to use to try and to zoom in on some of these shots to see who exactly is in this scene.
Yeah.
This is insane. This is absolute insanity, just spilled onto the screen. Absolute nostalgia, all from the 80s, 90s, everything's here.
I had a huge grin on my face when Sorento turned into Mecha Godzilla. And then we got the Gundam fight, and I love how he is in his DeLorean just speeding through. Their weapons are running out, people are throwing them weapons, and H is try this, and it's a crazy Chucky doll just laughing, and he it just starts tearing people up, and I had I thought the scene was a blast. I thought it was great. And
Right.
I did think it was really cool how there's like this really big modern video game fight, but the actual thing that you really have to do to win is play this old Atari pixelated game.
Right. Yeah, we're going back to that theme of got to go back to the past to figure out what to do in the future.
And I know we haven't talked about T.J. Miller's character IROC, and IROC is clearly a reference to the IROC Z Camaro that was very popular in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked his character. His character was not in the book at all, but I thought this was a great addition. I thought he was hilarious, much more funny than Sorento, and he was still kind of this big bad, like this antagonist, but he just took all questions literally. Like, how long is that orb going to last us? Like, probably like 10 million years. So yeah, you're good.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed his character.
Yeah, I did too. I think he was a pretty funny character. He's kind of like the Igor, the sidekick, of the movie for the villain. He is a very funny character. I think that he was implemented well, better than he was in Cloverfield, personally.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So yeah, no, I do agree. I do agree. I think he was used very, very well in this movie for being T.J. Miller. I think that using those T.J. Miller isms, I think, was what made his character work so well.
I was a little disappointed because... okay, I was very confused because Anorak's castle was not how I pictured it at all.
Mm-hmm.
It was very much in the keeping of like Darth Vader's castle or the Sauron's castle from the Lord of the Rings.
Right.
But that wouldn't be in keeping with Anorak himself, who was like all good. So I'm like, why do you have this evil castle? I don't know. And they didn't even use a Star Wars or Lord of the Rings reference. Because I'm like, this totally looks like one of those. Yeah. I don't know. Nitpick.
No, I can see why they didn't use a Star Wars reference because Star Wars is owned by Disney, and this is not Disney.
Boo.
Lord of the Rings, though, I feel like I did kind of feel that they used a Lord of the Rings reference with Halliday's character when he comes up giving them the key and the next clue. That I felt to me kind of felt a bit Lord of the Ringsy, but that was about as far as it went for me. I didn't really think I don't think there was anything else that was in it that was like that.
What did you think of when Wade has his extra life? Like, were you shocked when the catalyst went off and like deleted everybody except Wade?
Okay, so not really. I was expecting it to go off at some point in the movie. I knew that when they brought it up the first time in the earlier what I call the foreshadowing scene, that when they brought in the catalyst and they said this will reset the entire game, I knew right off the bat. I was like, okay, so they're gonna do it. They're gonna use it at some point in the movie. So yes, this didn't surprise me at all. That they used it. I knew it was coming. I was more just waiting for it to come. But the extra life. Oh, once again, I come back to my issue of things happen that aren't explained until it's too late. It makes me feel as if, at least at this point, it kind of made me feel as if I was in the dark and the movie just kind of moved on without me. I know where he got this. He got it from Simon Pegg's character, the curator from the museum. They have this bet, and Wade wins, and he gives him the quarter. That's where it came from. But for a movie that does have a lot of foreshadowing, I feel that they could have also foreshadowed this as well somehow. Better, at least. But I guess I understand why it's here.
In the book, he has to win a perfect game of Pac-Man. So it is much more of a challenge to win a perfect game of Pac-Man.
That feels like a much bigger challenge.
Yeah.
To me.
I was a little disappointed that I don't know why they couldn't have kept it that way.
Yeah.
And
that kind of brings up another issue. What are the stakes of this movie? Other than the big bad company IOI is going to put ads into the Oasis and take away the freedom.
Yeah, that is kind of one of my main issues as well is, like I mentioned earlier, I don't think the movie does a well enough job. Because in the book, it's people like Wade who are poor would not be able to use the Oasis. And
Right.
I understand there is a little bit of a dropped line where you learn that Sorento was an intern with Halliday, and he was giving him this idea, like, what if we have tiers? There's like a silver tier, a gold tier, like, people would have to pay and use to do certain aspects of this as well. But they should have capitalized on that a lot more and made it much more. But it's basically just good versus bad. They have to stop the bad guys because they're bad. If that
Right.
makes sense.
I don't know. It kind of feels as if so it takes the approach of chaos versus order, because the Oasis is very free on the borderline anarchy. I feel versus Nolan, who really wants to kind of put in rules. It sounds like in the book he really wants to put in a tier system. Wants to put in ads. He wants to structure it essentially, which is what I am understanding. So yes, we have that thing classic. That classic fight against chaos versus order, and in the end, it kind of becomes a mesh of both. But yeah, it sounds like, for me at least, the stakes are not very high. Either that, or they just didn't really chalk it up to be very high.
Well, okay. See, the problem is what they should have done was in the book, multiple people can play the challenges at once. If 2 people walked in to like where the Atari was, then 2 Ataris would materialize. Whoever wins first would win that challenge, if that makes sense.
That raised the stakes tenfold at that point.
It really does, and like I said, in the book, in the 3rd gate, he has to beat Halliday's high score on the Tempest, and Wade is like, oh crap, I am horrible at this game. He's been like great at everything except that. And then Monty Python, and then he has to play Adventure in the end, but he has to unlock it by using Kira's Dungeons and Dragons nickname, basically.
Right.
So, and the whole thing is that Sorento is just minutes behind him the entire time with playing Tempest with Monty Python, and Wade like messed up a couple lines, which like put him really close to Sorento, and Wade is like, oh my gosh, like Sorento is now in the same room as me, except it's his own personal room. So it's just like a race to the top, like so quick. Whereas because the catalyst went off, they were like, oh, okay, everybody's dead but Wade, and he's like, it's very peaceful. He just gives you this spiel about the Easter egg, basically. It's just more of a peaceful time of the Easter egg. The battle is over. Now it's time to enjoy this Easter egg exposition as Wade beats the game Adventure. I totally agree with you, though.
Right. I feel like that would have worked so much better if they had done more like that. Because it feels like Spielberg really reserved himself the more I think about this movie. Yes, there are a ton of references, and that really makes the movie very enjoyable. But by the same token, though, it sounds like the book just had so much more going for it. But okay, let me view this as a standalone movie. There is no book adaptation at all. Let's do that for a moment. Maybe this is pandering. Because, yes, references in movies to other movies is not uncommon. And it's fine to homage other films and other works of media, other video games, things like that. That's not really that big of a deal. That happens all the time. It could be done just for enjoyment or literary devices, whatever. But viewing Ready Player One as a standalone movie has no book adaptation, just came out by the whim of Spielberg himself. Is this pandering? What do you think?
In a way, I do feel like it is making it very, like, kind of palatable for audiences. Yes, there are intense moments, but never so to the point where it's almost like, oh my gosh, these guys might not actually win this. And right. I think that is kind of the Spielberg formula, though. Because if you think back to Goonies, Goonies is very similar because there's a group of friends who want to find the treasure at the end, just like this, and they've got the bad guys on their tail. There's really not a lot of explanation or motivation for either of them. Goonies is more intense at the end, though, and it does seem like, oh my gosh, they won't win. I guess I won't spoil Goonies for those of you who haven't seen it.
Okay, good, because I haven't seen it yet either.
Oh gosh, okay. Well, I'm glad I didn't say the end. But what I'm trying to say is that this does kind of seem like the Spielberg formula where, yes, it's not going to have this bleak, realistic ending where the bad guys win. The kids are always going to win in the end somehow, but it just depends on how intense they're going to make that. And I would say Goonies is a more intense movie with the adventure aspect and different trials they have to undergo and figure out than Ready Player One. But, yeah, nevertheless, if you're just looking at from a movie standalone point, I guess kind of making it for all audiences, it works. And I still had fun with it, and fun with the actions, and fighting sequences, and whatnot, albeit it was more fantastical and less realistic.
Right. And, yes, I do agree with that. This movie is meant to be fun. It's not really meant to be one that you're supposed to sink your teeth too far into and really start to read into it. That's not the point. Clearly, that's not the point. But half of me feels like if they would have implemented these references and ideas better, then we would have got a stronger movie, a movie that had more stakes, a movie that felt more organic than what we're presented with. Yes, don't get me wrong, it is still a lot of fun, and I had a lot of fun watching it. And I was talking with my roommate because he went to go see it with me, and we kind of concluded that this is really more of a theater experience than it is one that you can reflect on. Yes, there is a message, then we'll get into that in here in just a little bit. But at the same time, if it's, I don't know. It feels to me that there's some pandering happening here. Now, I will go back to what I said earlier. I think that I still believe that Spielberg is the best choice because he, as I said before, was the king of the 80s. Movie-wise, he created a bunch of household names that we know and love today and probably will know for years to come, I can guarantee it. So, yeah. I am surprised that Nolan. I'm surprised that Spielberg was able to reference as many things as he could and still act like he knows what he's talking about. Because never once did I feel this guy's out of touch. I never really felt that with this movie, and I think that that's one of the most important things to do with a movie like this. Is to not sound like you're out of touch because you don't want that. If you're out of touch, you've just lost 90% of your audience. I never felt that with this movie. But what I did feel is references without reason. And at times it works. At times, like we mentioned many times before, there's an issue when it comes to the script.
Yeah, I would agree with all of those issues, but also, not to make the book sound perfect, there are a number of issues with the book, and Ernest Cline did come into the screenplay and fix those issues, which I was thankful for, so it's kind of like he got another run at it, and he cleaned those things up. If you want something a little more challenging, because honestly, reading is more challenging than watching a movie. I mean, watching a movie, you're just a passive participant.
Right.
Reading requires your active imagination. So if you want that more of a challenge, then go for the book. But if you just want to kind of sit down and have a good time with your family, I would say, picking out different references. It's almost like a trivia game. Hey, what is that guy from? Hey, what is that guy from? What is that girl from? You get what I'm saying? Yeah. Or just kind of enjoying these different levels and designs, and with a pretty fun and creative story that is kind of weak on certain other aspects, then yeah, that makes sense. I feel like we're giving our recommendations already with these wrap-ups.
Well, before we go too far, I do kind of want to discuss the ending and the message and stuff like that before we get into our final thoughts.
Sure.
So, the end of the movie, Wade finds the key. Now I do really, really like how they implement pieces of this ending scene. So they're driving in this van down the street, and the people from IOI are trying to get to them. They're running into the truck, running into the van, and as they're running into the van, Wade on the inside, who is in the Oasis at this point, is like moving around himself because the real world around him is beginning to essentially infiltrate the virtual world. And earlier in the movie, we did kind of see it flip-flop, where the virtual world was affecting the real world, not just in terms of Oasis itself, but different pieces. So this I actually really enjoyed because you can't escape reality, which is something that the movie is trying to say. At least in this scene, it's really giving that visual message of you can't escape reality. No matter what you try and do, you just can't escape it. And at one point in the movie, Samantha and Wade talk about how reality is just so slow. And coincidentally, at that scene, they are talking to each other face to face, and the movie had slowed down at that point. So I really do enjoy this piece of the movie when reality essentially is knocking, and then they win. Basically, Wade gets the Easter egg, which is an actual egg from Halliday. I have no idea why the big red button is there to shut down the entire Oasis. But yes, then Samantha and him are trying to have a serious moment. People keep coming in and opening the doors to the van and closing it again. Once again, that this whole scene feels just like the reality is knocking. You have to do something. You can't just not. I really did enjoy that part of the movie.
Yeah, I thought it was a very exciting ending with the chase going on, how the action in the real world were affecting the virtual world. And I thought that was a great idea. That wasn't in the book, so I thought that was a really exciting chase scene. And I mean, you see this movie is still about a happy ending and kind of having fun, and also there being a message to it, because I like what Halliday says, like, well, you know, the real world is only the place you can get a good meal.
Right.
And he's like, reality is the only place where you can be happy. And I like how he passes that on to Wade, for Wade to hopefully bring that to their world. And they talk about how the Oasis is closed on Tuesdays and Thursdays, because he's like, you need to take time to enjoy the real world. And I really liked how I still feel like they got the message across. There's a really poignant section in the book where he's just extremely lonely. Mm-hmm. And he kind of resorts to some inappropriate cyber activities to kind of lessen his loneliness, but he realizes that it is just extremely unsatisfying and unfulfilling, and there's nothing like reality. So I really enjoyed the happy ending, where they close the Oasis on Tuesdays and Thursdays so people will remember the real world. And I know that's kind of like a message for our times, where people are like, you need to go out and meet people face to face, not just on Facebook, and live your own little virtual world and enjoy that human interaction. So I do think that's actually an important message that I'm glad it's obvious, but I'm glad they still mention it, and it's still lighthearted. I was very pleased with the end.
Yeah. And I do like this message. I like basically everything you said. I think is about the same. I feel about the same. It's important. It's really important for this generation. That's, I think, one of the better messages this movie can really send because of how it is. I think really my only flaw with it is that it is kind of shallow. To be fair, the rest of the movie is too, so if they would have had some deep message, I feel like it would have stuck out like a sore thumb and really brought this movie down more than it would have built it up. So yeah, I think what we get, I think it's good. I think it works really well, this message of, yes, you can't just skip out on reality. You have to focus on it sometime. Closing the Oasis on Tuesday, Thursdays to enjoy it. I think that works. They kind of found this middle ground of that. Yes, you need to escape reality, and at some point you need to rest at some point, but you can't just rest all the time. You can't just do what Wade's uncle did and spend all of your time in the Oasis, spend all the money and all that kind of stuff. You can't do that. You can't escape what reality is, no matter how realistic or virtual something may be. You can't escape it. It's impossible. So they find that I think a pretty good middle ground where both ideas are right in their own ways, but we have to work. They have to work together in order to better humanity or whatever. So yeah, I do agree. I think that this message is good. I think it works pretty well, albeit a bit shallow. But I won't dock the movie for that because the rest of the movie, it fits the tone of the rest of the movie. I think.
Well, the reason I'm not too concerned and I don't really care that it, yes, is kind of shallow, but I think what you're saying is the way that it's implemented is kind of shallow. It's just so obvious because they just say it. They come right.
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant to say is that it's implemented. They explain everything.
Right, and I don't really have a problem with that because I mean, in a world that seems increasingly pessimistic and realistic to the point of just, I don't know, just being a total downer in some things, I liked this positive note, and I liked how basically Halliday was saying, don't forget the simplest lessons in life of taking that leap and enjoying love and enjoying friends and family. And I like how it is drawn back to the beginning because where is the Easter egg hidden? He's like, the message is far greater than money or the Oasis. It's about that kind of childhood joy and childhood simplicity. And that's why they went back to his room in the end. And I did like the symbolism of that. Right. And I did like how it's like, yeah, you know, just because you get older doesn't mean you need to be more pessimistic or you're too good for certain lessons anymore. And I think that's what the movie was trying to do, is kind of bring out the inner child in all of us, where we can have fun in this communal event, geek out over certain things, and still learn something along the way. Yes, it's not very deep, but I still do think it's important, and that's why I'm okay with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, Alan, what is your rating and recommendation for Ready Player One?
How do I start my ending here?
I feel like you kind of already have in a way.
I know, yeah. There are a couple of things that I do kind of want to talk about before I end it that I didn't mention before. Maybe not. This movie is kind of. I felt this movie was kind of predictable. Not in terms of of how the movie gets from point A to point B, but just point A and point B. Okay, that's going to happen because of point A. But getting to that point, I didn't expect it to go down that path, I guess. That's a good and bad thing. We mentioned it before. It feels like the script is kind of all over the place at times. We do certain things and make certain references for almost no reason at all, but just because we can. I feel at times it has some pacing issues. I feel like at times for me, it just moved on way too quick, before I had a grasp as to what exactly had happened before. And I feel like at times I was being dragged along. Only happened a couple of moments. It wasn't for the whole movie, which is fine. I think the pacing for the most part is good. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes. I never felt it to be 2 hours and 20 minutes. I think that Alan Silverstreet for the music was a good choice. I know that they wanted to get John Williams, but they couldn't because of scheduling issues. I still think he's a good choice. He did Back to the Future, and we do get the Back to the Future theme in this, which I think worked really well. But I can't help but think that this movie feels a bit pandering to me. Some may not see that. I don't think you did. But for me, I felt that the script is a little bit weak, because they really should have integrated a lot of those references that I had issues with better, and made them feel like there's a reason that they're here, not just because we can. And that kind of goes down with the Oasis too, is that the Oasis itself just feels like, the movie even says, it's a place where anything can happen. Well, then that kind of causes an issue with the movie because we begin to lose focus a lot because there are so many different things that we can put into this movie that we want to focus on everything. But we need focus. This is a movie, after all. You really have to simplify. You need to keep the focus on a central idea, which this movie does do. I will give it that. But there are a lot of extraneous details that I feel could have been shaved off. Like a lot of references, if they were not integrated well, could have been taken out. Things like that. But I cannot deny the fact that Ready Player One is a very fun movie. It's very much a 21st century American movie. It may not be quite my style, but I still had fun watching it. I know a lot of these references, so just seeing them in a movie was just fun for me. And I'm glad that Spielberg was at the helm because I think that he does a great job. He did a great job here. He knows what he's talking about. I'm glad that he wasn't out of touch. So yes, it's still very fun. Like I said before, it's a theater experience, one that I think you really should see in the theater if you're going to see it at all. So, in the end, yes, I still think that, amidst my issues, I think that it is still a very fun movie. Maybe a bit shallow, maybe missing some development in a lot of areas, but it's still fun. And it's not about, I think this is a movie where it's not about the end, it's about the journey of getting there. That's essentially what the whole movie is. So, all said and done, I'm still going to give Ready Player One a 7 out of 10. Pretty solid recommend, though. I think that it's still a very fun movie. I'm sure that millennials will enjoy the crap out of it. Really, anyone in the past, anyone who grew up in the 80s or as a millennial, I'm sure they'll all enjoy it. This is kind of a movie that's really meant for everybody. So yes, solid recommend, 7 out of 10 for me.
Ready Player One was, a great theatrical experience. I saw it in 3D in the IMAX, and
I'm honestly, so jealous.
Yeah, honestly, it did feel like it was kind of cool because they're always wearing their Oasis goggles, and I had my big giant IMAX 3D goggles on as well. So there was this kind of relatable experience. It was a pretty neat experience. And I had a blast with this movie. The pacing, it's really well paced. It doesn't feel like 2.5 hours. There's a lot of fun where you can like whisper to your friends or family that you're watching it with, like, "Oh, did you see that? Did you catch that? Or what did you think about that?" I think it's a really great experience together. There's so many fun references. And like I said, it's more so about having fun, and it is very much designed like a video game with certain levels, boss fights, and things like that. That I think kind of plays into the movie and does kind of weaken the script a little bit, because we did talk about the issues with the script. I wish they could clean those up, and honestly, I think we're going to get a sequel to this movie. I just don't see how we couldn't with... I think it's just going to be really popular, and people are going to have a lot of fun with it. So I'm really hoping the issues that we had, I hope they kind of clean that up and solidify certain aspects in the story, but don't go too far and start pandering to us with politics or culture. That would be not good, I believe, for this movie. But overall, I think Ready Player One is a movie you can watch with your family or friends and have a great time. I know I'm going to own it on Blu-ray because I want to check out those other characters, see who I can spot, because it's fun, and just kind of go back and relive the story, because I do think it's a really fun story, and I can't wait to see it again on the screen. So, regardless of the issues, I felt like they weren't enough to knock the movie too much for me, because I got what was going on. Overall, I'm going to give Ready Player One 8 stars out of 10, and I'm also going to give it a solid recommend, just because of how they were able to incorporate all of these different figures and scenes into this movie. No easy feat at all, and I think they did it pretty well. Like I said, I think they could have done it a little better, but for what they're able to do and still make a fun movie with a really good message, I was highly impressed with Ready Player One, and it's a total blast, so I can't wait for it.
Yeah. And once again, the Spielberg's level of detail is insanity in this movie. I think for me, that's the biggest praise I can give it, is just the level of detail with the references and everything that Spielberg is able to fit and cram into this movie visually. I think it's just astounding. Once again, whether or not that works very well, that's a different thing. But yeah.
Yeah, I honestly, I can't wait to watch it again because I had such a fun time with it.
Right.
And thank you for joining us, listeners, on this Ready Player One journey. This is just one of many standalone reviews we have planned. Next, we are coming back with another standalone movie review, weekend of release style review for Avengers Infinity War. And then after that will be Solo. So we've got a bunch of big reviews coming out. We're also in the middle of a number of retrospective series. We just kicked off Cloverfield. We will be coming back about this week with 10 Cloverfield Lane. Make sure to check out our Jurassic Park and Halloween series, and we will be bringing you even more retrospectives throughout the year. So once again, thank you for joining us. Make sure to like, share, subscribe. You are all Ready Player One, Oasis, 21st Century kids. I know you guys know how to do all this stuff. And I'm not even from the 21st century. I'm from the 20th century. So, and even I still know how to do it. It's amazing. So thank you once again for joining me, Alan.
Yep. Sure thing.
And we look forward to coming back with some more fun reviews. It's going to be a total blast, I promise. Make sure to share Silver Screen Guide with your friends so you can have fun talking about movies with us. Subscribe through your favorite social media platforms, and we will catch you on the next level.